Q3 WIM Speaker Series. Today we have Debbie Clavijo, and she is the VP of Finance and Accounting for ACR Electronics. ACR Electronics is a former Manufacturer of the Year winner, and they make life-saving devices and beacons. So let me tell you a little bit about Debbie and why you should be super excited to be with us today. So Debbie has a varied career experience. She's had responsibility for not just finance functions, but also IT and HR. She has a Bachelor's of Science degree in Systems Analysis and holds an MBA with International Finance concentration, both from the University of Miami. Prior to working with ACR, she's the regional CFO for Florida at SafeBuilt, where she worked on integrations of 3 separate companies and worked through implementation of ERP systems in 6 months. And I can tell you, those 2 things alone, I think, are deserving of a medal. She's also been awarded a Circle of Excellence Leadership Award for her technical skills and implementation of ERP and post-acquisition integrations. She has also worked as a regional finance director and developed international best-in-class finance processes to safeguard companies against cyber fraud. She has been a third-party provider to Florida Makes, advising manufacturers on business continuity, risk management, as well as many other areas to grow your business. And to top it all off, she has a 6 Sigma Green Belt and has sat on the USF's, or University of South Florida's, cybersecurity program. So please join me in welcoming Debbie.
Thank you, Tara, for the introduction. Really appreciate that.
And Wendy, you're going to host or facilitate?
Yes, I will. Debbie, is your camera on?
Yes, it is. Can you see?
Yeah. Very
is
good.
It all
all
good?
right. Perfect. All right. So, Debbie, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and your education before you started your career?
Certainly will. Thanks again, Wendy, for leading this and hosting it. So I'll start way back when, and I'll start with the roots. I actually was born in South America by accident, I say, because my father was in the diplomatic corps. Father was British, mother was German, and moved around quite a bit around the world, 10 different places and schools before starting college. And I think that gave me a really good building block to remain positive. That's one of the things that I didn't know at that point with all the moves and not being able to set roots, that it was really giving me the basis of having flexibility, resiliency, and it gave me a really strong basis for always looking at every instant in life as the cup is half full and never half empty. Or at least I try to stick to that quite a bit. And I really, all of that movement just created strength. And I would say that if I look at it and in retrospect, the one thing I take away from it is there's only one investment that I've found never fails, and it's kindness. And that comes from Henry David Thoreau, but he couldn't have put it any nicer. And it just never has failed. And that and having a strong faith are all part of my background and what's given me, I'll say, the backbone to move forward, the springboard, the fundamental building blocks before going into a career.
Very good.
That's a little bit of background.
Well, thank you for that. And speaking of career, since our topic is operational excellence leading to financial success, can you briefly describe what you mean by that?
Certainly, Wendy. And I know we'll talk a lot more and expand upon the different items, but I'll try to summarize it in one way. For me, operational excellence really means listening first to the voice of the customer. Then you go and design products and processes whose outputs are actually those products and services that a customer, 1, is willing to pay for, 2, that it delights the customer each and every time that they consume the product or the service. And you have to accomplish that while ensuring that you have adequate pricing and costing for profitability. To me, that means operational excellence, which we've taken a huge cycle and a lot more of what's behind it, and come up with profitable organization. So operational excellence will lead to financial results if we follow everything that's behind, I'll say, that skeleton statement that I gave you.
Very good. And this is one of the most fascinating stories ever, especially since a lot of us have gone through our getting our degrees in a traditional sense. Tell us about the unique way in which you got your master's degree.
Certainly. I just came across a couple folks who had a company when I was studying at UM. So I got my degree, as you've mentioned, Tara, in systems analysis. Not sure why I'm in finance. We'll get there later. But systems analysis, and I met a family who owned a company in Colombia, and they said, "Will you come down and revamp our organization and bring in systems?" And I said, "I'd love to, but I have to get my master's degree first." And they said, "No, get your master's degree doing this." So I went out and I looked for a sponsor and found a professor who I'd worked with before. And he said, "Absolutely. So long as you check in, you give us all, you do this whole revamping and re-engineering as if you were studying this." So I kept in contact. And for a year, I was down in South America and revamped the entire organization. Common sense is operational excellence. They had people sitting across the room that should have been sitting next to each other. That's how simple and commonsensical, it should be, but was missing. So I really mapped out their entire process, all their processes. And then I also engaged a computer analyst, and I actually designed the system, and I had one person programming. And within a year, we had really gone from A to Z. So much so that I was able to come back, get my master's degree, graduate, but they asked me to go back and do the same with another company that they owned, which, believe it or not, was World Courier. And so I went back down there, and they had a handful of customers that were American or international customers. And I was supposed to do re-engineering, but I ended up doing sales and going to see CEOs for the different companies and grew that base to about 126 clients, probably within the year. So, a little bit of experience of an atypical earning of a degree, but definitely, the world teaches you a lot more than sometimes books alone.
The world also offers you turning points, right? And I think that one of the first pivotal points in your career was when you went to Citibank, because that just opened up a whole new kind of opening of doors for you. So how did you end up at Citibank?
So Citibank just happened to be one of those knock on the door situations where I walked into the office in Colombia, in Bogota, and I said, "I want to speak to the president or the CFO. I'm here to sell them services." And they said, "Well, you got to come back." And I said, "Okay." And I insisted. Finally, I got an appointment with the chief of staff. She was the most amazing woman I would say, probably met in business, or at least I felt that way because it was the first person who really mentored me. And I did get their business and I got their contract, but she said, "More importantly, I want you on my finance team." And I said, "On your finance team?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "I don't have a finance background. I have an operations background." She's like, No, we will do fine." So she sent me to New York to interview. A month later, I was back, but not just working for her. I was in their leadership program as an expat. So it was a phenomenal experience. And the first day I was on call, she brought me into this meeting. She says, "We're going to the meeting." I said, "Okay, great." I said, "Can I at least know what the meeting is or who it's with?" She goes, "Yep, it's all of our headquartered, CFOs from Brazil and from New York." And I just sat there going, I have no idea what I'm doing here. So I have to say that her, confidence in me and just teaching me everything that there was to learn about business protocol, business ethics, learning finance, which I was just baffled completely with. And within a year, it was amazing, just everything that she had taught me. But more than just practicing, finance. She had a work-life balance that was enviable of anybody. She was pregnant when I started working with her. And even though she left on maternity leave, she was always available for me. And so that to me was very important because the coaching, the mentoring never changed. She had held positions as important as the treasurer of the country, so had a wealth of knowledge. And just by bringing me into these very high level meetings and giving me that exposure, I think set me up for really continuing in finance, which I've done other than a small bout, and leading by example, being a person who was always approachable. I think those are the takeaways that to this day, after, I won't date myself, but many moon years back, I carry with me every day. Every time she traveled, she would take me with her, and she exposed me to everything I needed to learn along the path of, business and finance. So I, to this day, keep her dear to me.
While you had a very important mentor when you were at Citibank, you also served as a mentor yourself. So can you share some of the experiences that you've had as a mentor at Citibank?
So unfortunately, the tenure being a leadership program trainee in Columbia came to an end. But Citibank said, we need you back in Florida, which wasn't too bad, of course. I came back and assumed the position of total quality manager, definitely down finance role. And they said to me, they said, you have to present in 4 hours how you're going to take the business we have here, which was personal, high wealth note, personal banking, into a state-of-the-art environment, because they were doing service excellence at Citibank. And I said, I have no idea what you want me to do. They said, that's okay. You have 4 hours to figure it out, another 4 to present, and then talk to us tonight. And I said, okay, fine. I did just that. I interviewed people, talked to people, and I came across the vertebrae of one word that's called TEAM. You've all heard of it, right? Anybody not heard the word team? And I said, I got this one down pat. Together, everyone achieves more. And I started investigating, and no, it wasn't that. Of course it is, but it was also theorize, examine, analyze, and measure. And I was like, okay, figured it out, spoke to everybody, Citibank management, and they said, how long have you been here? I said, 8 hours. And they're like, we're on a great path. So I had a really neat adventure for the next 2.5 years where I was actually mentoring 10 teams simultaneously. I'll give you one example. Whenever you walked into that branch, the person you talked to was the teller, was the banker, was the person who wrote you letters, did everything. So while we think of quality in manufacturing and producing products, think about quality in service, a much more aloof, not tangible situation. So what I did is actually I built all the training for team, theorize, examine, analyze, and measure. And I had 2 teams and I pulled everybody out. Half of the team was on one day, half the team the other day. What we ended up doing is having 10 teams. I had sub-mentors, which were challenging to the nth degree, but we did it. And we went from having satisfaction in the low 80s to the high 90s within 2 years. We really revamped the business one more time, 3 times now. I took the business and we said, operations is operations, selling is selling, and servicing is servicing. And once that was done, we were able to penetrate the customer base. So now every customer, instead of having 1 product with us, had 2.5 products. Revenue came. All of the things we've been talking about. That was really the basis for then having finance background, operations background, and ever since then, it's taken me where I've gone in through all my paths. So that was a really great mentoring experience with 10 teams. They were called the Error Busters. They were called, you name it. Each team had their own logo, their colors, and they would actually present to Citibank at the end of the day after 2 years. And we won a worldwide award for it.
Very good. You also, though, had a unique interaction with one of the mentees during your training sessions, as I recall. Why don't you share that one with us?
So I was pretty new out of school, 2.5 years, right? Because that was my training program. And I was challenged with the person who ran operations, had been at Citibank for 33 years, all over the world, in New York, you name it. And every time I went to do this training, and just think about this for a minute pictorially, I was about 8 months pregnant at the time. So every time I walked into the office of this individual, it was like, been there, done that, don't need to be there. You figure it out. I need you at training. You have a team, you have operations. You're going to make them errorless. Your error rate is 54%. For every transaction you do, one of them is wrong. Something's not going on. You need to be there. No. So I went to lunch with them one day and I said, look, I really, just for once, think about the benefit you're going to have. Your people will buy into it. You'll have an easier life. You won't have to be here at night. He goes, I love being here at night. I'm like, okay, but your people don't love being here at night. Can you help me, please? After that conversation, which was very difficult with somebody who's been somewhere for 33 years, he did not miss a single meeting and he was the best mentor. And that was one of the teams that won $13,000 because they turned around from 54% accuracy to 98% accuracy.
Wow.
So I think the more important lesson, Wendy, there is you have to look at the audience. Who are you speaking to, and where is that individual on their journey in life? And they've not, you need to adapt to them, not them to you. And that is, I think, how you progress and get success.
So continuing on the journey, how did you get into manufacturing?
Well, after Citibank, which they decided to move all of their operations to Tampa thanks to the re-engineering, the family was not prepared to go to Tampa. We decided to stay here in South Florida. And I did a couple of things. I dabbled in consulting, I dabbled in startup, I dabbled in healthcare, did some really neat internet stuff way back too long before it was almost not available. And then an opportunity came up to join Sensormatic. It was an incredible opportunity to join as their director of US finance. So back here I am moving from again into that finance world, but I could because I had the operation background and finance. Within a month, I was told, well, your boss just resigned. There's not a vice president of service, so you need to take over and be the director worldwide. And I said, okay. And Sensormatic basically is theft control. For those of you that might have seen it in the past, and anything that has a little tag, Sensormatic, or the pedestals as you go into supermarkets. So we were doing everything in Boca Raton, Florida, manufacturing, really large floor. And I started to dabble into lean, even though I was in finance, because I knew if I didn't understand the product, I didn't understand the manufacturing process, there was no way I could come back and understand the numbers that were coming out. And that really was my first stepping into the world of manufacturing. I wrote a guideline on best practices for service finance, took it worldwide, which was great. And then Tyco came in and bought Sensormatic. And they asked me to replicate the same thing across 150 entities. And I had no idea what I was going to do with it. People would literally send me financials on napkins, faxes, emails. They'd call me and I was like, this is definitely not the way to go. So at the end of that tenure, I did a Six Sigma project on it, got my green belt, and we really did the whole redesign of reporting and finance. Unfortunately or fortunately, there's never a door that closes where another one doesn't if you have an optimistic view of life. They decided to decentralize everything related to service finance. But at that same time, I got a knock on the door from Siemens. And as I mentioned to you way at the beginning of our conversation, my mother was German. So Siemens had some sort of attraction for me and I wanted to join them. Fortunately, they were only half-hour walk from my house as well. I joined them in finance, and it was in the telecom business, which was booming, voice over IP, everything you could imagine, and everything I didn't understand. So when you don't understand, the most important thing is learn it, and master it. And so I did. And then Nokia came in and said, you know what? We're going to this joint venture. Do you want to go to Atlanta? And my husband looked at me and said, we're in Boca. We're staying in Boca. I said, okay, fine. Next thing you know, they called my husband and said, you're going to Boston. And I'm like, no, we're in Boca. We're in Boca. He's like, no, we're going to Boston. I said, okay. Called Siemens, and I had a friend, and he's like, oh my goodness, I was just going to call you. We have a company we're taking over in Boston, and I want you to come and do their finances. And there we went into Morgan Construction, and that was big time manufacturing. They actually create steel sheets, like for the Hyundai plant. They create rod steel, and they actually do the creation of the plants that process all of these for automotive and everything. So it was like, learn about standards, learn about raw material, learn about how it converts, learn about all these different areas. Really engaging opportunity as their controller. The most important thing there, though, was they were a private company, and here's Siemens coming in. Think about culture shock and how me at that point was responsible for changing it in the finance world. We put in SAP. They had an archaic system that was there from 1980 or so. The team was great. Everybody contributed. We had to put in SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, because it was, Siemens was public. And then I had to have a data integrity team as well, because we had to convert everything from our archaic system into the SAP. I knew that it had been an achievement when I had 3 audits simultaneously in the year-end audit. with 0 audit observations or changes. So that then I was entrenched in what is really manufacturing from a finance perspective.
So,
Needless to say, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, so what is your philosophy basically when it comes to manufacturing and operations?
If you don't have the right processes in place that meet the customer expectations, so you have to first listen to the voice of the customer. You have to design the products and the processes to meet their expectations, actually, no, to exceed their expectations, right? And if you have those two elements at the right price and cost, which requires a great supply chain team, which requires great sales because they got to know the pricing in the market and what it will bear. If you bring those operation pieces together, the financials will fall into place. And that's really, I can be in finance, but I think the success in finance is really understanding key performance indicators and operational excellence that leads to those finances and great financial success. Where that doesn't exist, the challenge is much too complex.
What and how do you ensure quality when it comes to your operations in that sense?
So I think the key thing is you've got to go back to the root. Where does the process begin, right? It's not when you're doing quality control at the end of a process. You have to look at quality of incoming materials, quality of your vendor. Do you actually, have your vendors accountable for the same level of quality that you have? Are they ISO certified? Do you have their, control sheets? Do you have their first pass yield sheets? What is coming into the house? If we don't catch it at the beginning, we have a lot of rework, we have cost, we add a lot of unnecessary steps. And so you are adding value, which later you have to, take all that value at loss, versus if you have everything coming in correctly and you take the time up front to have quality coming in, then I believe that's where the philosophy is to be able to have a good output and have quality. And you don't just check it at the beginning, because obviously when you have processes along the way, you've got to check those steps to make sure that they're done in sequence correctly, and so the output's correct. You don't want to have something go through the entire production line and you forgot one step and you didn't put the right IDs on there or the right, labeling or anything that could kick back your product. But quality assurance up front is better than quality control at the end. And I think, that also adds to financial success because you're not wasting resources.
Correct. And when it comes to resources also, it's not just for what's going right, what's going wrong, but contingencies, right? And you have a lot of experience in business continuity. So can you share with us what the best practices are when it comes to business continuity?
So from business continuity, I go back to the word operational excellence. In order to achieve that operational excellence, you need to have a plan to continue your business. Pretty logical. Let's go back to common sense. If you want operational excellence, you have to have processes in place, things in place to ensure that your business will continue through hardships, or at least that you've got a plan of mitigation, right? So there's 9 key areas, and in working with Florida Makes and NISTs and the MVP programs that were sponsored through Florida Makes, there's 9 key areas which I fully agree with that need to be looked at when you're doing a business continuity plan. You look at your general risk assessment, overall business. You have to look at people. Do you have the right people? Do you have the right cross training? Do you have the redundancy? It's really important that you match skill set to the job requirement. You may have a misfit and the person may be great in something else. So you really need to look at, to maximize the potential of every person, you need to inspire through leadership and not necessarily just manage. And that does a full assessment of your people, right? Think about what would happen. And pre-COVID, would you have ever thought that half your staff might be out on a sickness? When I was doing this, nobody imagined a scenario that could happen, right? We were faced with it, we had to react differently. We created bubbles. We did different things. The companies that had that in mind and hypothetically said this could happen were probably easier to react to that situation than somebody who denies that it's a potential, hazard, let's say. So really looking at the people. We'll go back to processes, operational excellence processes. Do you have redundancies? What happens if one piece of equipment fails? Are you going to have issues with the customer and liquidated damages? So again, if you look at the voice of the customer process from beginning to end, not just pieces in between, and make sure you have coverage. Your processes, what happens if one goes down? What's your plan? Know how long it's going to take you to bring the equipment back up. Look at the cost and benefit of maybe having a second line that does the same, that can come in. You may have companies across the world. You may want to be able to have, what happens if we have a hurricane or an explosion? There's many things that could close an operation down. So if you have somewhere else you can produce, transferability of information. What if the internet goes down? Do you just want to have things in the internet, or do you want to have paper copies? As much as we love paperless environments, for backup, you may want copies. And I'll give you, an example. There was a company that there was a hurricane further up north that came, and they didn't have a copy of their employee list other than in their system online. And they called me and they said, what do we do to contact our people? We don't have a copy. I said, well, I was there a couple months ago. Shouldn't we have taken that approach of getting a binder offsite that somebody can refer to? They're like, yeah. So things like that, we want to think about redundancies, especially in, processes. Do you have them mapped out? The plant, we've talked about the plant. Really assess the plant. Are we sure we have segregation of hazardous materials? Do we know how to approach them? Do we know how to approach in every instance? What is the PPE required? What do we need? There's about 10 to 15 questions for each of these topics that you go through and you analyze and make sure you have a plan, right? One shoe or one glove doesn't fit every plant or every operation, but there's a skeleton or a bone of questions that will help you get there. Machine and equipment, redundancy, how old is the equipment? When is it going to break? What is the maintenance record? Predict what's going to happen so you can continue operating and produce for the client. Market and customers, our environment in the markets are constantly changing. Did we ever think that we couldn't leave our houses and now our needs are different, right? No, we didn't. The customers, what do they want? Continuously keep a view of the voice of the customer. Materials and supply, are we sole sourcing anywhere? Is that healthy? Is there anywhere else to source? Transportation and logistics, do we do everything with one transportation vendor, one truck vendor? Do we do multiples? Do we have a backup so that we're never down? And then, even the financial and legal, if you don't have a succession plan for the president, who's the only one who can sign checks in a small organization, what happens if, God forbid, he wins the lottery or is hospitalized? You need succession planning. So these 9 topics are really important and are the building blocks for any good business continuity plan. And Florida Makes is really good at helping, manufacturing environments go through them. The knowledge is there from the past, but again, if any of the companies that are on the call have an interest, I'm sure that there are advisors that can help work through these topics. Really important to get to operational excellence is to have a good business continuity plan. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And I'm just going to take a different perspective, certainly, especially since this is sponsored by the Women in Manufacturing Committee. As a woman in manufacturing, what approach do you think you bring to the table that may be different from your male counterparts, but also unique to you?
Sure. I'll try not to get myself into a gender problem. I think one of the things that I bring to the plate, and I have throughout my career, is one, to understand the products and the business we're in, to have that business acumen to really, delve in, try to understand quickly what the business or the operation is doing. And you get that from all the diversity of industries and consulting backgrounds. So I think that's very important. The second thing that's super important from my perspective, and I've mentioned it on our call, is who are you talking to? Who are you trying to change the behavior with? What is the benefit that you're going to offer them? Understand their journey in life and work with the person, create that relationship, right? Because when you get the right process through the right people and working with them, again, the financials are a secondary. They should fall into place. I think those are really key things. You know, learn who your people are, talk to your people, and a lot of great leaders know everybody in their company by first name, you know, and create that relationship. I'll bring one more example to case, and I think that's helped me in, you know, in manufacturing and everywhere else. To have a conviction. Don't be afraid to voice your conviction. Do it politely. Do it, you know, respectfully. But hold your position. And then if you're still, you know, if everybody else doesn't buy in, fine, you've at least voiced it, but you create a participative interchange of information. You normally, as a team, get to a better place through that. Those are a couple of things. And most people will think that I'm somewhat soft-spoken quite a bit of the time, which might be true, but that doesn't mean that soft-spokenness can't be effective. So I take a very modular approach, and I prefer to do a little bit at a time. And when you get to the end, because I have the vision, you had no idea that I was doing everything that I did in the background. And that's a, you know, approach that I take quite often that has helped.
So speaking of approaches and what you could share with others, what advice would you give to other principals or owners of manufacturing companies that are looking to reach their operational and financial goals?
Oh, that's a challenging one. First and foremost, I would say always be open to change. Embrace it. It's really the jumping stone for success and the jumping board to get there. When there is change, manage it through excessive communication, but change is the only way you get to the next level. If you continue to do the same thing you do today, don't expect a different outcome. You won't get it. Okay? To get a different outcome requires change. Embrace it. I would say continuously improve. Stay abreast of the environment, the market changes. Always put the voice of the customer first, because if you don't listen to the customer, you know, you won't know what they're willing to pay for, and you may go down the development of a path that has nothing to do with what you think. Always listen to the voice of the customer. It is not wrong if you sample it correctly. Voice of the customer, unless you're making big projects for one particular customized situation, doesn't mean you listen to one voice. You listen to several voices, and you come back and look at what really makes sense. Again, when you have true world-class processes, I truly and firmly believe that they will produce the financial results. I have a motto that I keep throughout life, and we share that with a few colleagues, is when you're out at sea, and I love the ocean, you have a lighthouse, no matter what the storm is like, that beam keeps your eye on it, and it brings you home to where you have to be based, right? What you should be doing. If you follow that lighthouse and that beam, it will bring you back to where you need to be. Same thing, to have a vision, to know where you want to get to. I want to get to that lighthouse. Keep your eye on the lighthouse, look at the beam. Be willing to shift and change, because if the storm is coming one way, you got to steer one way in a sailboat. If the storm is coming a different way, you got to steer the other way. Go with the wind, get to your, you know, destination, but never lose the vision. Be flexible. I said convictions. Stay firm in your convictions and in your strategy. Strategy takes time. Quality takes time. Just don't comply with things. The basis of the word comply, if you listen to it, is complete and lie. Very different from conviction. Complete, energetic, you know, exchange or embrace engagement. That's a conviction. Be engaged. I'd say lead and don't manage. When you lead, you inspire employees to reach their maximum potential. When each individual on your team meets their potential, there's success. To manage is to get them to do their job. That doesn't mean change. That doesn't mean evolution necessarily. There's a difference. Lead and don't manage. Never be afraid to surround yourself with people that know more than you do, right? It's great to have A players. Focus on growing the A players and bringing anybody who's not an A player up a level. I think that interpersonal interaction is, apart from the, right brain numbers, that artistic piece of really bringing people to another level is a whole level of success that's not financial, but it will produce financial results. And I know we also want to take questions, so I'd like to close it on something that's my motto, and I think it summarizes not operational excellence to financial success, but life excellence to satisfaction, peace, and success. And I mentioned faith, and I don't mean to put it on anybody, but it has, given me what I need in life. And so I'll share this prayer. It comes from Saint Mother Teresa, and she has it on the wall of a children's home that obviously we know all of her works. And what it basically, I don't fulfill it all the time, but I'd like to. It says, people are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If your kind people may accuse you of selfishness, ulterior motives, be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway. If you're honest and sincere, people may deceive you. Be honest anyway. Be sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today will often be forgotten. Do good anyway. Give your best, and it will never be enough. Give your best anyway. In the end, it's not between you and anyone else. It's between you and becoming a better person and what you believe in. And I think we've transitioned in our conversation from how important is operational success to financial success. People's success is so important to operational and financial success of any business, any family, any environment. And I keep that on my wall and I try to live by that. So
It's very inspiring. Thank you for that, Debbie.
I don't know what other questions you may have, Wendy, but I think that kind of pulls it all together for me.
Yeah, well, I'd actually like to turn it over to the chat because I think a couple questions came through. Tara, I saw you were looking at one or two of them.
Yep, so we did get one question, or actually two, I think, from Christine. So first question, when you did project internationally, like in, I think, yeah, Colombia, what was the biggest challenge you encountered culturally? Work, ethnic differences, etc.
Because I was raised in the culture in South America, it was not foreign to me. I think the key thing though was obviously I don't look like I was raised there. And so the first impression whenever I met with people was like, you have no idea, you don't understand us. And so if I go back to some of what I've talked about, the relationship, understanding who I was talking to, what journey are they on, right? And the diversity I learned as a kid, even going to different places and moving around so much. So that is a challenge I found, was the incredible, no credibility in who I was or what I brought to the plate because I was foreign and because I was very young. But here's how I can benefit you. Here's really, I do have the background, I do have it. And it got to the point where to this day, I still have friends that I, exchange what's up and everything from there. So it's really, embracing that culture.
Thank
Hope
you.
that answers the question.
Yep. So question number two, when referencing financial performance, what are the key metrics tracked, prioritized across the companies you've led? Are they overlapping or different?
I would say that it depends on whether the bottom line is, what is your profitability, right? When you're working with a public company, net income is a profit, is how you measure profitability. When you're working in a private equity, it's EBITDA. So I think the key metrics are pretty similar. You look at gross margin, You look at what is your standard costs. Standard costs being you have a revenue from a sale, and then you have the cost of the product, the fully engulfed, I'll say fully loaded cost, and that gives you a gross margin at standard. If you're in manufacturing, that's pretty common throughout. If you have contractual environment, it might be a little different. You look at it at a contract base. You look at operating expenses, and you look at what % of your revenue goes out in operating expenses. But don't get fooled just by a profit and loss statement. Always make sure that if you want to be in business, you look at your balance sheet. So there's parallels. You have to adjust in the manufacturing world to some nuances, just like you do from a banking perspective in private equity, just like you do from an SEC requirement in the public's realm. But there's an underlying base. Those are the underlying key areas, your P&L and your balance sheets.
Thank you. If is there any other questions people want to throw in the chat, or feel free to come off mute. I feel like I see some people coming off.
I have a question, Tara.
Sure, go. Maybe introduce yourself and then ask the question.
My name is JD Hyden. I'm a fairly new member and a member of the Women Manufacturing Committee, and I'm curious as to when you're trying to build your team and attract more women into a manufacturing background, because stereotypically it's not thought of by some folks. I'm just shocked still today how bad it is compared to when I graduated with my manufacturing degree 20, 30 years ago. How do we better approach and find women and hopefully help to identify them other than just the skills? I mean, how do you go about finding more folks to bring in, I guess, is the question I have.
Sure. I would say that today our markets, and I'm going to speak more from a finance perspective, but I think across the board, the markets are tight. It's difficult to find really good qualified candidates, but never give up. Continue to search and never settle for, I can't find anybody else. Keep searching. And I think we've got LinkedIn, we've got, recruiters, in-house recruiting staff, and don't underestimate your networks. Go out to the networks, to manufacturing, to the Florida Makes, to SFMA, to the committees, and really engage. And also look at the universities, look at people coming out of disciplines that we want to engage, bring them on board. I've been very successful bringing folks on that are about to graduate, bringing them in as interns, and then really grooming them into it. I'd like to stay away from, yes, I'd like to bring more women into the, the space, but I think I haven't focused on that. I've really focused on who are the best candidates, not, and I've had a great mix of both genders.
No, and I appreciate that. It's good advice. I mean, I think the best piece is keep pushing a little bit farther, not just what comes across your desk, but go out and dig some more. And yes. I have a dog in the fight in the sense that, no, I'm not a woman, but I have a college daughter who's studying engineering and looking at manufacturing. So I also would like to provide her with tips on how to get out there and that sort of thing. And Absolutely. But I love how you answer that. Thank you very much, Debbie. And thank you for today.
My pleasure. Thank you. You have any,
I love the part on reaching to, don't underestimate your own network. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It looks like we got another question coming in from Philip. It says, what is one trait that you have seen derail other leaders' career?
I would say that one key thing is awareness of your staff and your employees, right? I think if you focus on everything but don't focus on the people, you're very open to derailing. There's too many traits, but I think that's really the one, because no matter what business you're in, manufacturing or not, people are your biggest asset, and they will either help you succeed or help you fail. And I think so. If there's one thing I would really focus on is training, competencies. Again, the right skill set to the right job is really important, because not everybody's cut out for everything, right? So really focus on getting the right people in the organization that will help you. And when you don't, if you're not confident and you surround yourself by people that can't do their job, and everybody has a strength, so there's room for everybody somewhere. But the leader that doesn't surround themselves by people who are stronger than themselves and who know more than themselves, I think, doesn't have the confidence and could be derailed that way. What else can I answer for you?
I'm looking to see if anyone else is. I see somebody coming off mute. I don't know if that's Mel. I don't know was that intentional? No? Okay. Sorry if I put you on the spot there. I don't see any additional ones coming in through the chat.
There was a comment though, if you wouldn't mind reading it, Tara.
Oh yeah, so from Claudia, it says, "We really appreciate your speech, Debbie. Thanks. This is very inspirational." I think we all agree.
I think if I can just, ditto on that, and I think you've heard it throughout the conversation, it's really about inspiring the people around you in all walks of life to get to a little better place. If you can make a positive impact in one person a day, then you will feel much better in life, is really what I've found. It doesn't always happen, but at least one person. I mean, you can't do it all the time with everybody, but that should always be your mantra.
Oh, we got another question coming in from Al. It says, when looking at KPIs, what's the first question one should ask during analysis?
I think the first question that you need to think about is this KPI a KPI that is going to allow me to act in some way, shape, or form to make something better? Will it help me manage? So if I just say, I want to know how many green bins there are, that's a KPI. I can count how many green bins, but what does it do for me? Well, if I say, I want to know how many pieces of plastic I'm returning to the vendor every day, that's a very significant KPI because it's going to tell me something I can act on. If I know that I'm returning 1 piece to vendor A and 10 pieces to vendor B, I can act on it. So the first question when I want to design a key performance indicator, again, there's some that are at executive level, some operational, some much lower, is how can I act upon the information it provides me? Can I measure it consistently? And is it effective to measure? Because if you have to go to the top of the roof every day to measure something and there's no stairs, it's insignificant to have the KPI. And I try to do extremes so that the message comes across, right? But you need, and again, it's not the quantity of KPIs you design in a process, it's about embedding them in the process and that they're actionable. You have to be able to act on them to make a difference. I hope that answers Al's question.
I think it did.
All right. Anybody else coming through?
I don't see anything else.
All right. Well, Debbie, thank you again so very much for taking the time to share. Oh, well, somebody just came.
All right. Well, have you used FMEA, and if so, do you find it as a good tool?
I have not used it extensively. I've used other tools to do root cause analysis. Obviously when I did project work and getting certified, yes, but there's other tools that I've also used, or say more consistently than FMEA, but it is a very good tool in the right application.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie.
Some great questions. Oh, which other tools?
So root cause analysis, we also do, mapping. One of the main things in analysis is really mapping things, looking at when you're looking to map something out, where are your internal controls, where are they failing? But, your fishbone diagrams are, for me, really, really helpful. They're very pictorial. One thing I haven't talked about is you have to also look at how people learn. I learn by, things that are graphical and pictorial. Other people learn by tables. So that might be one of the reasons why I prefer using a fishbone diagram to the FMEA. But, there's catalogs of tools you can use. and just be consistent so you have consistent measures when you're using them.
Thank you, Debbie.
Debbie, sincerely, thank you again for taking the time to do this for us. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know that it was just both technical and inspirational, which is a unique combination in and of itself. So thank you again so much for doing this for us.
Thanks for the opportunity, and I really appreciate everybody's time and taking lunch to listen. If there's any, afterthoughts or any questions, please field them through Wendy or the team, whoever you know on the team, and I'll be more than happy at any point to re-engage.
Thank you.
Best of luck to everybody with all of your operational excellence endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.